Welcome to this episode of Sunny Silver Linings. Sunny's guest is Dr. Larry Little, founder and CEO of the Eagle Center for Leadership. Dr. Little is a speaker, author, executive coach, and CEO of Eagle Center for Leadership, where he teaches those he works with to effectively connect with and speak into the lives of people around them, both professionally and personally. And now, your host, the founder and CEO of IT by Design, Mr. Sunny Kaila. Over to you, Sunny.
Thank you so much, Larry. And I was listening to a couple of your podcasts, and especially the 2020 recap, where you kind of recapped everything from Brad to everyone else. And Brad is a really, really close friend of mine. I really, really like that idea of leading from heart. Really, that's amazing. People normally tell me that, Sunny, sometimes you're just too kind of emotional in terms of making your business decisions. Like when I make my decisions based on my heart rather than the Excel sheet numbers here. And listening to you, I'm like, this is like I love that stuff because I believe in that stuff.
That's right, Sonny. And it's easy for task-driven leaders to lead from a spreadsheet. It's easy to lead from the task spreadsheet. But when you create the discipline in yourself to allow your heart to drive your decisions along with the spreadsheet, it's both. But when you put that people component in, it increases your influence. It increases the reason you're doing what you do. Really moving back and forth between execution and the people side, the task and the people. It's who you are. I've watched you do that for years. You're an amazing leader, and you do that so beautifully. It's easier for the other way. It takes a lot of discipline to kind of go back and forth and consider your heart and your head. So thank you for saying that and for checking out the podcast, Crossing the Line. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and so our purpose, when we defined our purpose, Larry, at ITBD, it was building our communities with passion for excellence. That is the cause. That is the purpose.
I love that.
And it's like the three pillars that we talk about: ITBD internal community, which is our people, and it's like more of community members' experience. So we have a special team where they just look at the experience of our internal ITBD employees. We call it Community Experience Manager.
I love it. Yeah. Well, you're getting it right. You're placing some importance and some priorities around that people side. And the truth is, if we can get aligned with that, it allows us to be way more productive anyway. If we can get aligned on that side of things and understand what commitment and priorities and expectations are all about, it really helps us to lead at a higher level.
Larry, what is the most important skill that especially technical-minded people need to develop to be good leaders?
Yeah, Sonny, it's a great question, and I think that so many times we overlook that question, and we have made we've made it our passion to work with technically minded people. It's what we do, and we do it for this reason. I believe the one skill that they really need, no matter what level of leadership, actually, if you tend to think from a technical or task-driven standpoint, effective communication is what I see over and over again, and we hear that a lot, and we hear it almost so much that we take it for granted that, that's just another communication thing. No. The truth is, if you can get this effective communication down, if you can get that, it significantly increases your leadership lid. It raises your leadership lid, if you will. It allows you to be more effective, both personally and professionally, because you see, the comfort zone for technically driven people are tasks. That's where they live. They love that. And in my vernacular, I will call that living below the line with the people skills above the line. So it's easy not to communicate effectively to those around you, but instead just to task your way into oblivion. So not to oversimplify your question, because it's a wonderful question, but I think the answer is really, if they can understand, the good news about this is, by the way, you can learn to communicate better. You can learn to be an effective communicator. It's not something that you're born with. It's not something that only some people can do. Science, human science has taught us that we can teach effective communication, and we can talk about how that works at a different time. But effective communication, I think, is the big rock that we have to look at for those who are task-driven or technically minded.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. And so, Larry, so when we look at MSP partners, our channel, communication, effective communication, is not only required for leaders. I believe that it's like for every single professional. So if I'm an engineer, it's equally important for me to effectively communicate with my internal team and people that I serve. So how do you view effective? I mean, is there any difference that you see in terms of the need of a developing leader versus need of a leader?
That's a great question. You know, the truth is, if you're a developing leader, if you're an individual contributor, if you're just an engineer or just an account, whatever you are a leader. Because we all need one person, right? At least one person, and that's ourselves. So it's about learning to lead yourself well. But here's what I find, Sonny. It's really interesting. I find that as someone rises in leadership, as he rises, the difficulty of listening becomes higher. So it's more. I find that the higher you are in the organization, many times, the less you listen. And I think it's a phenomenon that causes companies to stagnate. Certainly in these days where everyone is in a new normal, it's imperative that we lead differently. And I think that goes back to our effective communication. You know, the piece that's the most important piece of effective communication is listening. And I think that maybe in those mid-level leaders, maybe someone just getting into leadership, or even in their work environment, maybe they're on that lower level, whatever. They may be more open to listening because they want to learn, they want to grow. But those executives or that upper level management tier, somehow when we get to that level, what I'm finding, if you lead a group of people, I'm finding that maybe because we're so busy, maybe because we think we know it all, maybe because we think we understand what the answer is going to be before we ask the question, but the ability to truly listen diminishes as you rise in the corporate structure. And I think that's bad. I think that's something we must address today in our leadership.
Yeah, and I have personally experienced that, Larry. I have a engineering background, and when I was more of doing a lot more technical work, and I thought I knew leadership, but I didn't. And that's when it was really, talking to the customer, for example, talking to the people, your team members, listening was really, really tough. And then, once I was part of a peer group, and in the peer group, there was a discussion on this communication and what it takes to be an effective communicator. And the listening started, we started talking about listening, and especially this is owners group, MSP owners group. And one thing that we came out of that group was, the takeaway from that group was, have your owner's mute button on when you are on the call with your team members or your kind of weekly or morning huddles, because normally business owners and small business owners, they have the tendency to always kind of do a lot of talking rather than listening. And I'm glad to hear that, how you view effective communication and how important listening is. But that leads to my next question, Larry. What are the keys of effective communication?
Well, Sonny, I think the first thing we have to realize is that listening is more than just hearing someone or just sitting in a room. And that's the first key. The first key to effective communication. How am I going to improve my communication skills as a leader in an MSP in this case? And the first thing we have to focus on, and we have to be, Sonny, just as intentional with this as we do the latest technology that's coming out for our company or the latest software or whatever it is we do. We have to be so intentional about growing our listening muscle. It's a muscle. And many times this listening, the first key is something that people, I listen. Well, no, what they're telling us is, they may even be quiet, but there are different levels of listening. And just because, even if I just turn my mute button on, right, does that mean I'm really listening to you? And listening is done with our body. It's done with our face. It's done with concentration and focus, because if I say I'm listening and I'm busy doing something else and I'm looking and I have other things on my mind, I'm not listening. Maybe I'm not talking, but I'm certainly not listening. And one of the things I think that is so important that we have to understand as leaders, whether we're leading ourselves or we're leading, 10,000 people, is that true listening means being intentional. And we need to go to school and understand the different levels of listening. We don't have time to get into all of that today, but there certainly are different levels from just surface listening to truly understanding and applying and being able to see where the person is coming from, even if we don't agree with what they're saying. Boy, I'll tell you, Sonny, just to chase a rabbit, we could use a lot more authentic listening in our country today from everyone. If we could truly understand the steps that someone else has taken to get to where they are and what they're trying to communicate. It takes work to do that. It takes discipline. It takes an intentionality, right? So I think the first step is that listening and becoming a student of listening. One of the things that I find is that we get so busy in tasking and getting things done that we think listening may be a waste of our time. We think listening may not be important. But let me tell you why it's important. Because listening leads to the second key. And the second key is learning. And what that means is, if I'm going to be an effective communicator to Sonny, I've got to learn about Sonny. I've got to be truly investing in what he is saying and who he is and what he needs to say to me. Learning is a skill that you can grow in. If I like to say I'm a lifelong learner, but that doesn't necessarily come naturally. Sometimes I'm tired. Sometimes I'm busy. Sometimes I'm distracted. But no, I want to be a learner of people. I want to be a learner of things that I don't know. I want to grow in every area of my life. And I think when we truly listen first, it leads to learning. So, you could give yourself a little quiz. How much do you really know about the people in your life? What makes them happy truly? What is it that gets on their last nerve? Do you know that? What about your team you're leading at your MSP? How do you motivate your team? Have you learned how to speak the language of those on your team who have, in my vernacular, a different personality, a lion, a camel, a turtle? Have you learned to speak turtle talk? Have you learned to speak the language of the lion so that you can communicate? See, when we have to listen to hear and then we have to learn how to communicate. Another mistake we make, Sonny, is that we believe one size fits all in communication. That's not true. That's not effective communication. That's just unilateral talking. But effective communication means I need to discover your personality. I need to understand what story. What is your story? I don't think we share our stories enough with each other on our leadership teams. And you say, well, that's just soft and fuzzy. No. That allows you to truly understand those you lead so that you can shortcut things when you need to get the job done, instead of putting up with the chaos and the hurt and the unintentional offenses that might. Well, no, if I understand your story a little bit better, I can communicate to you in a more effective way and then ultimately lead you. So I think it's really important that we realize it's kind of a building process. These keys, if you will, starts with listening and becoming a listener. Learn that skill, understand it. But you listen, not just to listen, you listen to learn. So what am I learning about the people around me? What am I learning about what incentivizes them and what discourages them? Do I really know how my tone of voice affects those on my leadership team? And then when we listen and then we learn, that allows us to, I think this may be the most important of the three things I think that it takes to be an effective communicator and have effective communication. I think that this third key is critical, and that's we learn to lead with questions. So how do I deepen my learning? How do I deepen my listening? How do I go to that next level of truly understanding? It's not by giving dictates, Sonny. It's not by giving demands. It's not by giving my opinion about everything like I own the only opinion that matters. It's about asking questions. It's about asking open-ended questions. Well, how did you? Well, what do you think about? And once again, if you're not careful, we'll write that off as technically driven people. Well, I don't have time for that. You don't have time not to do that. You know what that shows as you ask questions to someone? It shows a sign of respect. And I think as effective communicators, one of the things we've got to understand is respect is not just derived from someone who is technically competent. Respect is derived when we lead the people from our heart and our head. And this asking of questions sends a message to them that you are important. You are so valuable that I'm going to ask a question, and then I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to learn. And then I'm going to ask a follow-up question. And then I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to learn, and then I'm going to ask another question. And when we get this skill down of leading with questions, you will see, I've seen it, you will see your influence rise. And here's another thing I'm seeing, not even just in our country, but across the world, and in corporate America and in small businesses, as we talk and work with them, the trust of each other, the trust of teams, building trusting is really, really, it's going away. It's really difficult these days. Perhaps it's because we live in a different time and everyone's busy. Perhaps it's a saturation of things that distract us. I don't know what it is, but I can tell you that trust level on teams is not rising. So we have to address that. How do you raise the trust level and even more importantly, what about, we'll take one rabbit we'll chase. What about your personal relationships? How do you raise trust in a relationship, whether it's personal or professional? How do you do that, Sonny? You know what you do? You listen and you authentically learn from that person, and you ask questions in a humble with a humble tone. You ask questions with a true inquisitive, I want to learn, a true learner tone, if you will. And you know what that does to those in your life? It says you are important enough to me that I would sit and ask questions and listen from you and learn. And when we slow down to do that, our influence rises, and ultimately the trust of those that we're learning from and listening to and asking questions to, the trust rises. So I think we go circle all the way back around to your great question. What do technically driven people need to know? They need to know that they should put some time, energy, and effort in becoming effective communicators and understanding the importance of effective communication. We're all communicating either poorly, right? Maybe with toxicity. We're all communicating in a good way or bad way. So why don't we put our effort and energy into becoming great listeners and great learners and figuring out who our team member, what's the DNA makeup of the personality of our teams, what incentivizes them, what discourages them. Then why don't we honor them and respect them by asking questions and allowing them to tell their stories to us? Just my thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Larry. And Larry, you talk a lot about leadership. You wrote a book, Make a Difference, which we use here at IT by Design. Our leaders, any new leader joining, or our leaders that, so we have gone through Make a Difference program as well. It's embedded into our hiring practices in terms of personality assessment as well. But you talk a lot about leadership. And as you just mentioned, leadership is influence. And that comes from relationships, right? And relationships are built through communication, effective communication. So now, if we start with effective communication and listening and learning and leading with questions is so important to make sure that we are effectively communicating, we're building meaningful relationships, and making that difference, having that influence. So can you talk to me a little bit about Make a Difference? How our natural wiring plays a role in effective communication, and also in terms of like listening, learning, and asking questions. So can you talk to us a little bit about the personalities?
I can, and thank you for asking. If you think of personalities, we talk about the much-loved monkey who have the people skills, and they people love them and they love people. They're naturally driven in that social setting to people. And then you talk about the leading lion. It's the big picture task person, think type A. And these are all generalities to help us understand ourselves and help us to understand others. This is not for us to have a psychological evaluation, in the weeds of a personality profile. this is designed to help you become a more effective communicator. So you have the monkeys who are people driven, and the lions who are big task. Then you have what we call competent camels, and the competent camels are small tasks. They like to dot their I and cross their T's, and they are that technically driven accountant engineer. And then you have the tranquil turtles. Tranquil turtles are one-on-one interpersonal relationship people. They love to be behind the scenes. They have a few relationships, but they're very deep. They have very deep social infrastructure and very wise people. So what we've done is we've taken that and we've assessed from a personality standpoint, how do you lead? Lions would be those hard chargers that leave people behind. Monkeys would have a great time with all those around them, but they may not get a lot done. Camels can get in the weeds quickly and lose the vision, and turtles have a tendency to respond slowly because they want to think about it and work through all scenarios. So what we've done is, if you think of a continuum, Sonny, a vertical and horizontal continuum, but on that horizontal line, above that line, the monkeys and the turtles live, and that's where our people skills are. And if we kind of start with that premise that above the line are the people skills, below the line are lions and camels, and they're task driven. Let's execute. Let's get the job done. Well, if we spend too much time below the line, we're going to burn everybody out. We're going to task ourselves into oblivion, but we're not going to get a thing accomplished. I talked to 2 leaders this week that were both squarely below the line. They couldn't understand why the culture was in disarray. They couldn't understand why communication was not happening until they went to school, if you will, on themselves and learned, wait a minute, we both live and lead below the line. So if you stay below the line, you experience lack of communication and burnout. But if you stay above the line, all we're going to do is just be about people and nothing else. We're just going to love everybody, and we're just going to make sure. Well, that's great. It feels good for a while. But when nothing gets accomplished, you're not going to be able to take care of your people. You're certainly not going to be able to execute and reach your goals. So what we've got to do is learn to cross the line. We've got to learn to understand who we are and then get out of our comfort zone. And if we tend to be a lion or a camel, we've got to learn some people skills. We've got to learn to get on top of that line and be that effective communicator. Then we've got to come back down and execute out of our strength. If we are naturally turtles and monkeys, well, we've got to learn to get out of our comfort zone and allow ourselves to be accountable to execute. So we've got to have execution, and we've got to constantly be going above the line and below the line, whatever the scenario requires. The myth and the thing that we believe as leaders is that we can lead from one place. We think perhaps, well, I'll just stay below the line because it's more comfortable, and I'll just let somebody else worry about the people skills. And that's very toxic and creates a toxic environment. Leadership is not natural. Leadership is learned, because you have to learn to lead above the line and below the line. So I will tell you this, I'm very excited about next month. I've written a book. I've been working on it for a couple of years. It's called Crossing the Line. And it really matches with the Make a Difference. It's made to take the Make a Difference work and go to the next level. And so it teaches us how to have focused alignment on top of the line and measured execution below the line. So how to cross that line from your head to your heart and your heart to your head, both are important. So it's very important to understand who we are from a personality standpoint so that we can lead others above the line or below the line. And it's a discipline to know when to be above the line and when to be below the line. But more than we have time to go into today, but that's just a brief synopsis of the work we're doing around helping leaders to understand how to cross the line from their head to their heart and their heart to their head.
Yeah, no, thank you. And make a difference. For the first time I read that book, your book, and it kind of really made me learn how to communicate with people better in my leadership team. Because it used to be like, you're listening and you are kind of, you think you're doing, having that effective communication, but sometimes you still kind of, you're struggling to have the right relationship, right health in that relationship. And when I read your book and learned more about your communication style, the accountability style, and especially how do I need to talk to my sales manager? How do I need to talk to my CTO? And based on, their personalities, if they're lion or, what is their dominant personality? It kind of changed my world. It really really changed my world. In my leadership team, my relationships got healthier. And with that relationship, because of effective communication, which, just learning based on personalities, how do I communicate? How do I listen? What is it kind of, do they want bullet points? Do they need detail? And we all need all those skills in our team, or natural strengths in our team, unique abilities in our team. But we also need to know how can we communicate. So thank you for sharing that. And Larry, if there's one thing, so if I am a developing leader or I'm a leader, there's one thing that I want to do, as you said, listening and effective communication is a muscle that you have to be intentional about working on that every single day. Is there any tip that you will give if I'm intentional, I'm a lifelong learner of effective communication and listening, doing a better job at listening and asking questions? Is there anything I can adopt in my daily routine or something that will help me develop my muscle?
And Sonny, and I will say this: you learned, you read the book, but you learned, and you made the decision to practically apply what you've learned, and that's the differentiator. You said, I'm going not just to learn this, but I'm going to apply it. And this is the tip that I would give in your model and what you did and how you continue to grow. If I'm a leader, I would make a choice to say, look, I'm intentional about growing my company. I'm intentional about growing new skills so I can do what I do technically. I know that that's an ever-changing world. And so I've got to stay on that cutting edge of being relevant, just like you are staying on the cutting edge, being relevant with your skill set below the line, if you will, the task. I would say the tip is be intentional about learning EQ still. That's emotional intelligence. Be intentional about growing your people skills. Be intentional about learning leadership. Be just as intentional as you are below the line as you are above the line. In other words, say I'm going to make sure that if I'm comfortable below that line and learning new skills, tactically, and I'm going to make a conscious decision to invest in some learnings above the line. That might mean listening to podcasts on leadership. That might mean reading a book on EQ. Might mean reading Make a Difference or Crossing the Line. But there are a plethora of books out there. Even if you don't at first quite understand them, or even if you think, this is really like a foreign language, the more you invest, the more you'll want more. So see that as just as important. See growing your EQ just as important as continuing to grow your IQ and your skill set.
Thank you, Larry. And if I want to assess my kind of personality, if I'm lion or camel, I think leaders can do that by going to Eagle Center, and it's for free, I believe.
Yes, it's absolutely free. EagleCenterForLeadership.com. EagleCenterForLeadership.com, and take the test. It's absolutely free. It'll take you 2 minutes to take the test. It's a very short 20-item test, but then it will tell you what you are, and then you can make some decisions around how to grow in that knowledge. But that's the first step. EagleCenterForLeadership.com.
Thank you, Larry. And you mentioned your new book. I read Make a Difference, and I'm so excited about your new book. When is that coming out?
Thank you. Well, it's at the publisher now, and they're telling us hopefully in February, hopefully the end of the month, or the 1st of February, it will be coming out. And I'm very excited. It's been an effort of intentionality, and it's taken us, Sonny, I really actually started it a couple of years ago, and I wrote it actually. And then for the last year, I've been going back and wait, let's change this, let's tweak that. So the birthing of that book has been quite a process. And even during this pandemic and that kind of thing, I think that it is going to be a very nice complement to Make a Difference for those who really want to learn and take their learning to the next level. So I'm very excited about crossing the line. Thank you for asking.
And if I want to get it, I will get it from Amazon.
Yep, you'll get it from Amazon. You can, and by the way, let me say this too. We are just finishing our Audible book of Make a Difference. So we've been a little behind in getting our Audible book out, but that should be out as well in February. The Audible book of Make a Difference, then the either the Kindle version or the hardback version of Crossing the Line will be on Amazon or wherever you get your, or you can certainly go to eaglecenterforleadership.com and order it there as well.
Thank you, Larry. Building teams and building high-performing teams with a strong culture, it takes a lot of effort, from hiring to developing that talent, and to retain that talent, you have to kind of give people meaningful roles where it is kind of they get up in the morning and they are aligned based on their natural wiring. And with Make a Difference, taking the assessment test in terms of your personality assessment, applying that in the hiring process to kind of really aligning people, right person, right seat. And we benefited from this business philosophy, the leadership philosophy a lot. And Larry, thank you so much for making a difference in IT by Design's world. And I know any company out there that is listening to this, if you have not read Make a Difference, and if you don't know that how to communicate effectively with different types of personalities, this is the place. Eagle Center for Leadership. A lot of resources, online resources are available, and you can leverage those resources to lead well and also develop your next generation leaders. And Larry, thank you so much for coming to my podcast. I appreciate it. A lot of valuable insights in leadership. And thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom with our viewers. Thank you.
Sonny, thank you for allowing me to just have a conversation with you. You are an incredible leader, and I've watched you through the years. Thank you for how you're leading. And you are the essence of the book, Sonny. You are truly making a difference, and I thank you for that. Thanks for having me today. It's been fun being with you.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sunny Silver Linings. The link to the personality quiz is in the video description below. If you found a helpful tip or two in this episode, please consider sharing it, and be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss any future episodes. Thank you again, and we'll see you in the next one.